What does it take to land on the moon? Or to quiet the thunder-like sound of a supersonic jet? It takes geniuses. But what if the history books forgot to mention them? Many of these world-changing engineers were black, and their stories were hidden. One woman's math literally reshaped the way planes fly, and her name was almost lost forever. 1. Mark Dean. When you think of the first personal computers, you probably think of names like Steve Jobs or Bill Gates. But what about the guy who actually built the box? The thing is, one of the most important people in making the PC a part of our daily lives was a man named Mark Dean. Mark Dean is, simply put, a computer genius. He started his career at IBM in 1980, right when the company was in a secret race to build a computer that people could have in their homes. Before this, computers were giant machines that filled entire rooms and cost millions of dollars. The idea of a personal computer was brand new. The big problem was figuring out how to make all the parts talk to each other. How do you get a keyboard, a printer, and a monitor to all work with the main computer brain? This is where Mark Dean stepped in. He co-invented something called the ISA bus. That name sounds technical, but just think of it as a super smart highway inside your computer. It let all the different parts or peripherals plug in and work together. Without this, you couldn't add a mouse, a printer, or a game joystick to your PC. It was a total game changer, but he didn't stop there. Mark Dean also led the team that created the first color monitor for a PC. Before him, most computer screens were just green or black text. He helped give us the world of color we now expect on every screen. To put it mildly, he painted the digital world. Here's the real wow factor. Mark Dean holds 3 of the original 9 patents for the very first IBM PC, released in 1981. This machine set the standard for almost every computer that came after it. And as if that wasn't enough, he later led the team that created the first gigahertz chip, a processor that could handle 1 billion calculations per second. So why isn't his name known by everyone? What many overlooked is that back then, credit almost always went to the company, IBM, not the individuals. And as a black engineer, even a brilliant one, his face wasn't the one IBM put in front of the cameras. His name was left on the patents. While the headlines went to the project managers, Mark Dean's work is incredible, but what about the work that got us off the planet entirely? Our next engineer wrote the literal code that helped power the rockets that took us to the stars. 2. Annie Easley. Going to space is maybe the hardest thing humans have ever done. It takes thousands of pounds of explosive fuel, computers running perfect math, and of course, rockets. But what many people don't know is that one of the most important rocket systems in history was powered by software written by a black woman named Annie Easley. Annie Easley started her career at NASA in 1955. But here's the kicker, she wasn't hired as an engineer. She was hired as a human computer. That's right. Before they had machines, they had people, mostly women, who did all the hard math by hand. It was tough work, and they were often seen as just support staff, not the real scientists. But Annie Easley was brilliant. She quickly taught herself computer programming as the first machines started to arrive. She became one of the first black computer programmers at NASA, writing code for all kinds of projects. Her most famous work, though, was on the Centaur rocket stage. You see, a rocket isn't just one big tube. It's made of stages that drop off as it goes up. The Centaur was a special upper stage rocket. It was the first one to use a super high-energy fuel mix of liquid hydrogen and liquid oxygen. This gave it the power to lift very heavy things into space. Annie wrote the software for this powerful and, to be honest, dangerous new technology. Her code was vital. It helped figure out how the fuel would work, how the rocket would steer, and how it would get its payload into just the right spot in orbit. And what did the Centaur launch? Oh, just some of the most important space missions ever. It launched probes that went to Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn. It launched the Voyager probes, which are now outside our solar system. And today, the descendants of that same Centaur rocket are still used to launch weather satellites and military spy satellites. So why isn't she a household name? Back then, the astronauts were the rock stars. The engineers who built the rockets got some credit, but the programmers, especially the human computers who became programmers, were almost invisible. They were seen as just typing in the numbers. But the truth is, Annie Easley wasn't just typing. She was writing the language that made spaceflight possible. Annie's work helped us explore other planets, but our next engineer wrote the code that helped us land on another world, the Moon. 3. Clarence Skip Robinson, July 20th, 1969. Neil Armstrong says his famous words as he steps onto the moon. It's one of the greatest moments in human history, watched by millions. We all know the names of the astronauts, Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin, but we never hear about the engineers who made sure they didn't, crash. One of those hidden heroes was Clarence Skip Robinson. He was a brilliant engineer who worked on the Apollo space program. His job was one of the most stressful, high-stakes jobs you can imagine. He was in charge of testing the guidance and control systems for the lunar module. Let's break that down. The lunar module, nicknamed the Eagle, was the spidery, fragile-looking ship that actually separated from the main rocket and landed on the moon's surface. It had to fly perfectly. If the guidance system was off by even a tiny bit, the astronauts could miss their landing spot, run out of fuel, or drift off into space forever. Skip Robinson was the man who made sure that didn't happen. He was the son of a Tuskegee airman, so you could say excellence and aviation were in his blood. He and his team at TRW, a company working with NASA, were responsible for the digital part of the mission. They tested and perfected the computer programs that controlled the lunar module's engine. Here's the part that will blow your mind. When Armstrong was making his final descent, he saw that their target landing spot was full of giant boulders. He had to take over manual control to fly over the dangerous spot. The only reason he could do that was because the guidance software, the software Skip Robinson's team perfected, was working flawlessly in the background. It was handling the main job of braking and descending, which let Armstrong focus on the final, delicate steering. Skip Robinson literally helped write the code that landed humans on the moon. So why have we never heard of him? The thing is, the Apollo program was a massive team effort, with over 400,000 people. The story was always focused on the brave astronauts in the ships, the thousands of engineers on the ground, especially the black engineers who had to overcome segregation just to get in the door, were left in the background. Their work was seen as just part of the larger machine, but without them, the mission would have failed. Skip Robinson helped us reach the moon, but our next engineer was focused on a problem right here on Earth: how to fly faster than the speed of sound without shaking cities apart. 4. Christine Darden. Have you ever heard a sonic boom? When a plane flies faster than the speed of sound, which is about 767 miles per hour, it creates a shock wave that sounds like a massive thunderclap or an explosion. It's so loud it can shatter windows. This sound is a huge problem. It's the main reason you don't see super-fast passenger jets, known as supersonic jets, flying over land anymore. For decades, NASA tried to figure out how to quiet the boom. And one of the key figures in solving this puzzle was a woman named Christine Darden. Just like Annie Easley, Christine Darden started at NASA in the 1960s as a human computer. In the colored computers section, a segregated group of black women who did all the math for the male engineers. It was a time of intense racial separation. But Christine wasn't satisfied with just doing math for other people. She had a master's degree in science, and she knew she was just as smart as the engineers. So she did something bold. She went to her boss and asked him, "Why are men with my same education being hired as engineers, but I'm stuck as a computer?" To put it mildly, this was a risky move, but her boss was so impressed by her question that he promoted her. She became one of the few black female aerospace engineers at NASA. She was assigned to the sonic boom problem. For years, people thought you couldn't get rid of a sonic boom. It was just a fact of physics, but Christine Darden didn't believe it. She spent 25 years studying the problem. She wrote a revolutionary computer program that could simulate sonic booms. Using this, she proved a wild new theory. You could change the boom by changing the shape of the plane's nose and wings. Here's the wow factor. Her work led to the quiet boom designs that NASA is using right now. They are building a new test plane, the X-59, that is designed to fly at supersonic speeds but only make a sound as loud as a car door closing. If this plane works, it could bring back supersonic travel for everyone, all thanks to the math Christine Darden did decades ago. She was one of the Hidden Figures, a name given to the black women at NASA whose work was forgotten. Her name was buried for decades, her work credited only to the male project leaders. Christine Darden helped us see how to fly faster. Our next engineer built a tool that helped us see the universe in a whole new way. 5. George Carruthers. When we look up at the night sky, we only see a tiny bit of what's really out there. Our eyes can only see visible light, but the universe is also shining in all kinds of light we can't see, like X-rays and ultraviolet light. To see this invisible universe, you need special cameras. And one of the most important space cameras ever built was invented by a man named George Carruthers. George was a science whiz from a young age. He built his first telescope when he was just 10 years old, using a kit he bought with money he earned as a delivery boy. He was fascinated by space. He went on to get his PhD in engineering and started working for the Naval Research Laboratory. His big idea was to build a camera that could see in ultraviolet light, or UV light. This light is blocked by the Earth's atmosphere, so to use a UV camera, you had to get it into space. George invented a camera that was not only powerful, but also small and lightweight. And here's the real kicker, he made it plated in gold to protect it from the extreme temperatures of space. In 1972, his invention was chosen for the Apollo 16 mission to the moon. The astronauts took his 50-pound gold-plated camera and set it up on the moon's surface. It was the first moon-based observatory. The pictures it took were, to put it mildly, stunning. It took pictures of stars, galaxies, and gas clouds, all glowing in UV light, but the most famous picture it took was of the Earth itself. It showed our planet's atmosphere glowing in UV, revealing things scientists had never seen before. It showed how pollution was moving and how our planet's magnetic field protected us. This one camera gave us a whole new way to study the stars and our own planet. George Carruthers was given awards, but his name never became famous. Why? What many overlooked is that the story of Apollo was always about the astronauts. They were the heroes who used the tools. The brilliant engineers like George, the ones who actually invented the tools that made the science possible, were left as a footnote in the history books. George Carruthers helped us see the stars. But our next engineer was the very first of her kind, a woman who broke down one of the biggest barriers at NASA. 6. Mary Jackson Host. In the 1950s, NASA was a place of high-stakes science. They were in a race to space, trying to build the fastest, most powerful planes and rockets. The engineers running the show were almost all white men. It was a closed club, but one woman, Mary Jackson, decided she was going to kick the door open. Like several others, Mary started at NASA in the West Area Computers, the segregated section for black female mathematicians. She was a math whiz and a great team player. She worked for an engineer on the supersonic pressure tunnel. This was a massive, powerful wind tunnel that could blast air at speeds up to twice the speed of sound. They used it to test new plane and rocket designs to see if they would hold up under extreme conditions. Mary was so good at her job that her boss, a man named Kazimierz Charnecki, saw her potential. He told her she was good enough to be an engineer, not just a computer, but there was a huge problem. To become an engineer, she needed to take extra college courses, and those courses were held at a local high school that was all white. It was segregated. Mary Jackson had to go to court and get a special order from a judge just to get permission to sit in the classroom with white students. She won. She took the classes, passed with flying colors, and in 1958, she officially became NASA's first black female engineer. This was a massive deal. She didn't just get a new job title, she shattered a barrier that had held back hundreds of talented women. As an engineer, she continued to work on airflow at supersonic speeds, helping to design the very spacecraft that would one day take men to the moon. She was an expert on how air flowed over the vehicles, a field called thermal systems that is critical to making sure a ship doesn't burn up when it re-enters the atmosphere. Her name was forgotten by the public for a simple reason: she was a double pioneer. As a woman and a black person, her story was ignored by the mainstream press. Her work was vital, but she was hidden inside a system that didn't want to celebrate her. It wasn't until the book and movie Hidden Figures came out decades later that the world finally learned her name. Mary Jackson broke barriers inside NASA. Our next inventor created a tiny device that you are probably within a few feet of right now, and it helps save lives every single day. 7. Otis Boykin host. Sometimes the most world-changing inventions aren't big, flashy machines. Sometimes they're tiny parts hidden deep inside. That's the story of Otis Boykin, an inventor who created a tiny piece of technology that is in almost every electronic device you own. Otis Boykin was a brilliant inventor who set up his own lab. He was obsessed with electronics, specifically with resistors. A resistor is a tiny part that, as its name says, resists electricity. It controls the flow of power, making sure that a device gets exactly the right amount of electricity, not too much and not too little. The problem was that old resistors were not very good. They would change their behavior when the temperature or pressure changed. A resistor in a hot room would work differently than one in a cold room. This was a huge issue for sensitive electronics. Otis Boykin decided to fix this. He invented a new kind of resistor called a wire-wound resistor that was incredibly precise. It was smaller, cheaper to make, and, most importantly, it was reliable. It could handle big changes in temperature and pressure without failing. So where did this new, amazing resistor get used? Oh, just about everywhere. The US military used them in guided missiles. IBM used them in their computers. But here is the biggest wow factor of all. Boykin's resistor was so reliable that it was used to improve the pacemaker. A pacemaker is a small medical device that gets put inside a person's chest to help their heart beat correctly. It sends tiny, regular electrical shocks. To put it mildly, you really want the resistor in a pacemaker to be reliable. Boykin's invention helped make pacemakers safer and more effective, saving countless lives. Otis Boykin had over 25 patents to his name, but why isn't he famous? His inventions were the definition of unsung hero. They were the small, vital components inside other famous inventions. The credit went to the companies that made the missiles, the computers, and the pacemakers, not the black inventor who created the tiny, perfect part that made them all work. Boykin's work made electronics smaller and more reliable. Our next engineer's work made giant buildings more comfortable for thousands of people. 8. David Crossweight host. Have you ever been to a giant concert hall, a massive theater, or a huge office building? Have you ever stopped to think about how they keep the building warm in the winter and cool in the summer? Heating and cooling a space that big is an engineering nightmare, and one of the masters of this invisible science was David Crossweight. David Crossweight was an engineer and inventor who was an expert in HVAC. That stands for heating, ventilation, and air conditioning. It's the science of controlling the air inside a building. In the early 20th century, as buildings got taller and bigger, this became a huge challenge. David was a genius at solving these problems. He designed heating systems for all kinds of massive new buildings. His most famous project? He designed the entire heating system for Radio City Music Hall in New York City. Think about that. Radio City is a huge, sprawling building with a giant auditorium that seats over 6,000 people. Crossweight had to figure out how to keep every single one of those 6,000 people comfortable, whether it was a freezing January night or a hot July afternoon. His system was so brilliant and so efficient, it was celebrated as a marvel of modern engineering. He didn't just stop there. He held over 39 patents in the US for his HVAC inventions. He created new kinds of pumps, valves, and temperature control systems. He literally wrote the book on heating and cooling, creating manuals and guides that were used by engineers all over the country. So why has no one heard of him? The reason is simple. His work is invisible. When you go to a show, you admire the architecture, the lights, and the performers. You don't think about the air ducts or the boiler room. David Crossweight's genius is hidden inside the walls of the buildings he helped make famous. His work was all about comfort, and the best heating system is one you never even notice is there. Crossweight's work was about building up cities. Our next engineer did the same, but he also had to fight a second battle just to get his voice heard. Host. What does it mean to build the future? When we hear that phrase, our minds immediately go to the flashy stuff, right? We think of rockets piercing the sky, revolutionary computers, and the charismatic inventors who become household names. We celebrate the person who gets their name on the patent, the face of the company. But what about the world under our feet? What about the invisible, complex systems that keep our entire society from grinding to a halt? I'm talking about the pipes, the concrete, the grids, the literal foundations of our cities. I'm talking about the sewers that keep us healthy, the roads that connect us, the bridges that defy gravity. This is the world of civil engineering, and it's arguably the most important industry you never, ever think about. But like so many crucial fields in America, for a long time, this field, the field of building America, wasn't just hard to get into for Black engineers. It was actively and deliberately designed to lock them out. The doors were barred, the windows were shut, and the opportunities were non-existent. Today, we're talking about a man who didn't just knock on that door. He took a sledgehammer and broke it clean off its hinges. 9. Howard P. Grant. His name might not be in the flashy history books you read in school, but his legacy is written in the steel, concrete, and soil of one of America's most iconic cities. Howard Grant was, to put it in the simplest terms, a true pioneer, a trailblazer. In 1949, he achieved something monumental. He became the first Black graduate from the University of California, Berkeley's College of Engineering. Let's just pause and let that sink in for a second. 1949. This isn't the 1800s. This is the mid-20th century. World War II had just been won, the post-war boom was beginning, and yet, at one of the most famously progressive universities in the entire country, he was the first. Can you even begin to imagine the pressure, the crushing isolation, the sheer, unyielding determination it must have taken to walk those halls, to sit in those lecture theaters, to excel in a place where absolutely no one else looked like him? He wasn't just studying for finals. He was carrying the weight of his entire community, knowing that if he failed, the racists would use it as proof that they didn't belong. But graduating against all odds was just the first impossible thing he did. His next move was just as groundbreaking, just as historic. Howard P. Grant became the first Black civil engineer to ever be hired by the city and county of San Francisco. Again, the first. He wasn't just starting a new job, he was integrating an entire, deeply entrenched and powerful field. The challenges he faced are hard for us to even comprehend today. This was a profession dominated entirely by white men, many of whom were openly hostile to his presence. He was the only Black person in the room, every single day. He wasn't just designing blueprints. He was navigating a social and political minefield, dodging prejudice and systemic racism at every single turn. But he didn't let that stop him. Howard Grant got to work. And what did he do? He built San Francisco. No, really. He was an instrumental part of the team that designed and constructed the critical, vital infrastructure that allows that massive city to function. We're talking about the complex water and sewer systems that keep the city clean and healthy. We're talking about the intricate network of streets and massive public transit projects. This isn't glamorous work to the public. It's not a shiny skyscraper, but it's the most essential. It's the literal backbone of a modern metropolis. Every single time someone in San Francisco turns on a tap, flushes a toilet, or rides a streetcar, they are using a system that Howard P. Grant helped build with his brilliant mind. But this is where the story gets even more incredible. Here's the kicker. Howard Grant's groundbreaking engineering work is only half of his legacy. He could have just kept his head down. He could have collected his paycheck, been quietly proud of his own firsts, and been the one Black engineer the city pointed to as a sign of their progress. But Howard Grant wasn't built that way. He looked around those empty rooms, he attended those all-white meetings, and he realized that his personal success meant nothing if he was the only one. He saw that he was alone, and he made a conscious decision to change that, not just for himself, but for generations to come. He knew there had to be other Black engineers out there, just as isolated, just as frustrated as he was. So, what did he do? He co-founded the Northern California Council of Black Professional Engineers. And let's be crystal clear, this was not some friendly social club for weekend get-togethers. This was an activist group. It was a support system. It was a fortress. They had a mission. They fought for jobs for Black engineers. They went into communities and mentored young Black students, showing them that a career in engineering, a career building the world, was possible for them too. They actively fought against the racist, unfair, old boy network rules and biased attitudes that kept brilliant black engineers from getting hired for the big public projects their own tax dollars were funding. And this right here, is exactly why Howard P. Grant's name was forgotten by mainstream history. It's a tragic, double-edged sword. First, his technical work, as vital as it was boring infrastructure. It was pipes and concrete and sewer junctions. The public doesn't celebrate the engineer who designed a sewer. They celebrate the architect who designed the flashy skyscraper on top of it. His work was, by its very nature, invisible. 10. Jesse Russell. To understand what Jesse Russell did, we have to go back to the 1980s. Jesse Russell was a brilliant engineer working at the legendary AT&T's Bell Labs. This was the Holy Grail, the place where the transistor was invented, the birthplace of modern technology. At the time, mobile phones were just starting to exist, but they were barely mobile. They were car phones, and they were monsters. They were giant bricks, usually installed in a heavy bag or bolted into a car's center console with a huge, clunky handset and a curly cord. And the technology? It was all analog. Think of it exactly like a walkie-talkie or an AM/FM radio. Your voice was just a radio wave. It was notoriously unreliable. The reception was terrible. It was full of static and hissing. You'd get crosstalk where you could literally hear other people's conversations. And if you drove too far from one cell to another, boom! The call was dropped every single time. It was a clunky novelty for the rich, not a reliable tool for the masses. But Jesse Russell saw the future. He had a much, much bigger idea. He knew that this clunky analog system was a dead end. The future, he argued, was digital. Instead of sending your voice as a fragile, messy radio wave, what if you could turn your voice into a clean, efficient string of ones and zeros? Just like a computer. This was a completely revolutionary, outside-the-box idea at the time. A digital signal could be compressed, meaning you could fit way more calls into the same sliver of airspace. It could be encrypted, making it private. And it was crystal clear. Jesse Russell and his teams at Bell Labs became the chief architects of this new digital world. They essentially invented the blueprint for what would become the 2G, or second generation, cellular network. This was the first digital network on the planet. Jesse Russell personally holds numerous patents for the core, foundational technologies that make this entire system work. This includes the high-capacity systems, the advanced transmission methods, and, this is the big one, the groundbreaking invention that allowed for the handoff of your call from one cell tower to the next without dropping the call. The very reason you can talk on your phone while driving 70 miles per hour down the highway. The reason you can walk from one end of a city to the other without your call ending. You have Jesse Russell and his team to thank for that. Now here's the wow factor. This might sound like a simple technical upgrade, like going from a cassette tape to a CD, but it's not. That shift from analog to digital, the one Jesse Russell championed, is not just an update. It is the update that makes everything on your modern phone possible. You cannot send a text message, an SMS, over an analog signal. It's impossible. You can't send a picture message, an MMS. You definitely can't browse the internet, check your email, watch a YouTube video, or stream a song. All of that, the entire smart part of your smartphone, requires a digital network. Jesse Russell's pioneering work on 2G is the direct, undisputed ancestor of the 3G, 4G, and 5G networks we use today. He didn't just make a better phone call, he helped build the foundation for the entire modern smartphone industry. So why? Why isn't his name as famous as Alexander Graham Bell? Why don't we talk about Jesse Russell in the same breath as Steve Jobs or Bill Gates? What happened? Well, first, as with many great minds at that time, his groundbreaking work was done as part of a huge team at a massive corporation. This was Bell Labs. When breakthroughs happened, AT&T got the credit, not the individual engineers. The company and its brand swallowed the achievements of its people. But there's a more fundamental reason, one that's very similar to Howard P. Grant's. Jesse Russell's invention was invisible. His genius wasn't in the phone itself. It was in the network. It was in the air, in the cell towers, in the complex code and transmission protocols. We, the public, are obsessed with the object we can hold. We see the cool new iPhone, the sleek new Android, The phone that folds in half. We celebrate the industrial designers and the marketing gurus.